You don't lack motivation. You're caught in a war between two versions of yourself, and the wrong one keeps winning at the worst possible moments. People who figure out why that war is happening stop losing it. People who don't spend years wondering why they keep torching the exact things they worked hardest to build. In this video, I'll show you number one, why self sabotage feels almost compulsive, like it has its own momentum that willpower alone can't touch. Number two, the ancient concept that gives this pattern a precise name and removes the shame from it entirely. Number three, how to catch the sabotage impulse in your body before your mind finishes rationalizing it, and what to actually do in that moment. Let's get into it. A woman I'll call Priya had been sober for 11 months. New job, new apartment. People in her life were starting to expect things from her again, and she told me something I've heard in different words from dozens of people. That responsibility scared the hell out of me. 3 weeks later, she relapsed. Not because she was weak, because something in her had decided that the version of herself people were now expecting her to be was more terrifying than the one she'd been trying to leave behind. Priya's story isn't unusual. What's unusual is the way she described what happened in the days before the relapse. She said it didn't feel like a decision. It felt like she was watching herself from slightly outside her own body, making choices she knew were wrong, and she couldn't find the brake. That feeling, that sense of being a passenger in your own behavior, is one of the most common things people describe when they talk about why they self sabotage. And the reason it feels that way is that it literally is not a conscious decision, it's a groove. The Vedic tradition has a word for this, samskara. It translates roughly as impression or groove, and the ancient teachers used it to describe the mental channels carved by repeated experience. Every time you respond to stress, fear, or expansion in a particular way, that groove gets a little deeper. Eventually, the groove is so deep that when life puts you on the record, the needle just falls in. You don't choose it, it plays. Neuroscience has a version of this too. Repeated patterns of thought and behavior literally wire neural pathways. The more you've run a particular response, the less metabolic energy your brain needs to run it again. Automatic behavior is efficient behavior from the brain's point of view. It doesn't care whether the behavior is good for you, it cares that it's familiar. This is why people say, I always learn things the hardest way. Always, to the point where the consequences outweigh the goals. That's not a character flaw. That's a samskara loop running on autopilot. The groove is so deep that even when the cost is obvious, the needle still falls in. And here's what makes this worse. The loop tends to activate hardest at moments of genuine progress. The promotion comes through, and suddenly you start picking fights with your partner. The diet is working, and you blow it on a random Tuesday for no reason you can name afterward. The relationship is actually good, and you find yourself creating distance. This is not random. The Gita describes it as the lower nature, what it calls the field of Prakriti, asserting itself. The ego, the ahamkara, has built an identity around a particular version of you. When your actual life starts to outgrow that identity, the ego experiences it as a threat, not a metaphorical threat, a survival level threat, and it does what threatened things do. It attacks the source of the danger, which in this case is your own growth. The takeaway here is this: self sabotage is not weakness, it's an old groove meeting new terrain, and the groove is winning because nobody showed you how to step out of it. The Bhagavad Gita opens on a battlefield. Arjuna, a warrior, sits in his chariot between two armies and cannot move. He knows what he's supposed to do, he has the skill to do it, but something inside him is paralyzed and he starts generating every rational sounding reason he can find to justify not fighting. Krishna's response to this is not try harder, it's not believe in yourself. Krishna points Arjuna to the structure of what's happening inside him. There are two natures at war, and Arjuna has confused himself with the one that's afraid. Modern therapy has arrived at almost the same map. Internal Family Systems, developed by Richard Schwartz, describes the psyche as a collection of parts, different subpersonalities that developed at different points in your life to handle different threats. Some parts are protective, some are exile, some are so old they're still responding to a world that no longer exists. The part that sabotages you is almost always a protector. It's not trying to hurt you, it's trying to protect the version of you it knows how to keep safe. Priya's sabotaging part had developed in her addiction years. It knew how to survive chaos. It knew how to manage shame. It did not know how to manage people's expectations, visibility, or the particular vulnerability that comes with being someone others are counting on. So, when her life got genuinely good, that part read good as dangerous and pulled the emergency brake. She told me once, I was afraid that if I got better, I would cease to exist, replaced by someone I wouldn't recognize. That's not irrational. That's a part of her psyche being completely honest about what growth felt like from the inside. The Gita calls this the ahamkara, the ego maker, the faculty that constructs and defends a fixed self concept. The ahamkara is not evil, is doing its job, but its job is preservation, not expansion. And your soul, what the Gita calls the Atman, is always pressing toward its dharma, its natural unfolding. When those two forces meet, you feel it as friction, as resistance, as the inexplicable urge to blow up the thing you've been building. This is why just believe in yourself doesn't work. You're not dealing with a belief problem. You're dealing with a structural conflict between a part of you that wants to grow and a part of you that has decided growth is the threat. The practical shift here is to stop fighting the sabotaging part and start getting curious about it. Ask, what is this part afraid would happen if I actually succeeded? What is it protecting me from? The answer is almost never logical. It's usually something like people will expect more and I'll eventually fail anyway. Or if I'm visible, I'll be judged. Or the person I become wouldn't be someone I recognize. Once you can name what the part is protecting you from, you can negotiate with it instead of wrestling it. You're not trying to destroy the protector, you're trying to update its information. The window between the samskara activating and the behavior happening is small, but it exists, and the people who learn to use it stop losing the internal war. The problem is that most people are trying to catch self sabotage at the level of thought. They're trying to argue themselves out of it, reason their way past it, use willpower to override it. By the time you're reasoning about it, the groove is already playing. The thought is downstream of the impulse. The Gita points to something earlier in the chain. It describes the sequence like this: the senses contact an object, a craving or aversion arises, the mind begins to move toward or away, and then action follows. The intervention point the Gita identifies is not at the action level, it's at the sense contact level, the moment before the craving has fully formed. In body terms, that moment has a physical signature. For most people, it's somewhere in the chest or gut, a tightening, a kind of hollow pull, a subtle agitation that arrives before any conscious thought has named it. This is what practitioners of somatic therapy call the felt sense, the body's pre verbal signal that something is activating, and it arrives consistently before the rationalization does, before the story, I deserve a break, or one drink won't matter, or I'll start again Monday. The body knows first. The practice is simple and uncomfortable. When you feel that signal, pause before you move, not to suppress it, not to analyze it, just to feel it completely for 30 seconds without acting on it. Name the physical sensation out loud if you can. There's a tightening in my chest. There's a hollow feeling in my gut. Naming it activates the prefrontal cortex, the part of your brain that can make a considered choice, and it buys you just enough separation from the impulse to choose differently. Arjuna's moment on the battlefield is exactly this. He feels the impulse, the paralysis, the urge to retreat, and instead of acting on it immediately, he stops. He asks. That pause, that 30-second gap between the impulse and the action, is where Krishna's entire teaching lives. The Gita calls this viveka, discernment, not the absence of impulse, the ability to see the impulse clearly before it becomes behavior. Viveka is not something you think your way into. It's something you practice your way into, one pause at a time. Over time, the pauses get easier. The groove doesn't disappear overnight. But every time you pause and choose differently, you're carving a new groove alongside the old one. Neuroplasticity research confirms this. New neural pathways form through repetition. the same mechanism that built the old ones. You are not stuck with the grooves you inherited or developed. You can lay down new ones, but only if you can catch the moment before the old one plays. The full sequence looks like this: feel the physical signal, name it out loud, pause for 30 seconds without acting, then ask the protecting part what it's afraid of. You won't always choose differently, but you'll choose differently more often than you did before. And that's the war being won, one skirmish at a time. That 30-second pause is learnable, but mapping it onto your specific pattern, the exact groove you're running, and the exact part that's running it. That's where most people need a second set of eyes. If you've tried to work through this on your own and you're still finding yourself back at square one after the good stretches, the fastest way through is a direct conversation. I do free one on one calls, 30 minutes, no pitch, no agenda, other than figuring out exactly where you're stuck and what the actual next step looks like for your situation. You'll walk away with a clear answer to that question, whether we ever work together again or not. The link to book is in the description at dailymindreset.com/consultation. There are limited spots each week, so if this landed for you, book it now while it's still on your mind. Subscribe if you want more of this. New videos drop every week on the intersection of ancient wisdom and the kind of psychology that actually changes behavior. Tell me in the comments, what's the one area of your life where the sabotage hits hardest? And do you recognize the physical signal in your body before it happens?